Welcome, friend, to the Journey Podcast. I'm your host, Sergio Chaeta, and I'm here with my co-host,
Carol Chaeta.
And we are excited to be on the final episode of this season called Church Scar.
It truly has been a blessing. It's just mind-blowing to hear all the stories and the individuals that we have had. You would have never expected to hear those stories.
Yeah. And we have a special guest.
That's right. Miss Alicia.
Hi.
Joan.
Hello.
Welcome.
How are you, Alicia?
I'm good. Yes.
Would just like to say that we're very thankful and grateful that you have decided to join us.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. A day with teenagers, I'm doing great.
You are a teacher, right?
Yes.
I was going to
am.
say, I know we know you, but do you mind introducing yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes.
What do you do for work? Are you married?
Well, I am a music teacher. I teach middle school and high school, and I'm the founding fine arts teacher for Fine Arts for All School. So, yeah. And it's a joy, and then some days you just like, why? But, so I teach choir and also head the fine arts department as well there.
Not only do you teach, but you're in charge of this whole entire department.
Yeah, they have theater, dance, orchestra, visual arts, etc.
So you must be making the big bucks, huh? You must be making the big
That's
bucks.
right.
I wish.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you are, of course, you're married. You're a teacher. You are the head of a department. You have kids, and then you're doing your doctorate degree studies.
Well, there's Go Surgeon introducing Alicia.
How do you have time for all of this?
I'm like, how do you even just the kids right there? I'm like,
I take it one day at a time. Lots of support. Of support. My husband is great support.
You want to give a shout out to your husband? You want to give a shout out to your husband?
He's very private.
He's very private. Brother, we love you.
Who you
we
are.
love you. You know who you are. We love you.
There you go.
We appreciate you.
There you go. Yeah, it's lots of support. He's the one who he told me to go for it. It's something I've always wanted to do, and he's the one who really encouraged me to go for it.
Alicia, so we've invited you to come into this podcast titled Church Scars to talk a little bit about church. So tell us about your journey. Tell us a little bit about your journey in the church and perhaps out of the church. Have you always been, were you raised Adventist? Tell us a little bit about your upbringing.
Yeah, I was raised Adventist, and my parents were very much involved in the church. In fact, my father was principal of a Jamaican high school in Mandeville. In Mandeville, Jamaica. So it was a Seventh-day Adventist school there. So he was principal there. And then my mother was the Spanish teacher. Yeah, she was the Spanish teacher at the college.
wow.
And then later on, we moved to Puerto Rico, that's where my mom is from. And there we landed at I know it's a new name today, but it was Antillean College then. And then my mom was dean of the woman, and my father was the English professor there. Okay. So very much in there in the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Were you born in Jamaica?
I was born in Jamaica, yeah.
Okay, so both of your parents, your father is Jamaican and your mother is?
Puerto Rican.
Puerto Rican.
Oh, that's a fun fact.
What a mix.
What a beautiful mix.
Yeah.
Don't mess with Alicia. Listen.
Those two mixtures, gotta pray,
Married to an
centered in
African.
Jesus.
That's awesome. That's very unique. I love it.
Yeah.
Tell us about your church journey.
So I was always involved, and even when I was, teenagers, we had AY, and we were always involved with AY. It was interesting the way my church journey was, because I had two older siblings. And so they were like 10, 13 years older than me. So my church journey was very diverse. Like my parents attended a diverse church. It was a different culture, like West. That's where they attended. But whenever there was something happening, for the West Indies College, whatever event, there were times we went to the Caribbean church for those kind of events, or they asked my dad to speak. So there are times we went to the Caribbean church. My mom, people knew her, so if they wanted her to do some kind of drama, I think she was great at poetry and things like that. Then there are times we went to the Spanish church. And then with my siblings loved attending, the black church. So that's the times I went with them for the black church, because I just, loved the liveliness and everything. So I'm like, can I go? Can I go? So that's when I went also with them. But that was my church, like even young, AY. So Friday night AY was with the Spanish church. Saturday evening, AY was with the diverse church, or sometimes the West Indian church. So that was my thing when I was young. So pretty much it was just very, I was very comfortable in any of those churches. I felt at home. Okay. And so growing up, I went to a boarding academy. And then after going to boarding academy, I came back home, and then college, came back home. Even then, after college, I was involved with all of these churches, like still involved, like La Sociedad de Jóvenes, with that was Friday night, either playing the piano or doing something musically with them. And then, my church, same thing. Or, any of the churches, sometimes even the African American church. Also, I was either sometimes playing the piano or directing a choir. So I was pulled all these different directions, which I enjoyed and I loved. And because of that, people, all the people who were involved in music, we all knew each other. We got to know each other because we all worked each other, and we all came together. And that's the journey for Church Hurt. I think that it begins there. And that's when we started a whole youth young adult choir. And it was different. It was different from what everybody was used to, because we had, all the people were from all the different churches. So we had young people from Sunday churches. We had young people from the Spanish church, the black church, the West Indian church, the white church, all of that. So it was very mixed, and we did a whole array of music, And so music is something that it can be, for a lot of artists, a lot of musicians, that's where the church hurt sometimes comes for, with us. Is because we don't always think like the status quo. We tend to think differently. We kind of tend to push the boundaries. A lot of times we crave creativity. The status quo, kind of bores us. And when things are the same, it drives us insane almost. It's like something has to be different. And so that was like 50 to 75, youth and young adults in the choir. So starting from ages 13 all the way to age 35 in the choir. That, and it was just from all those. So that was them. And from then on, we were invited to all these different events, like conference events, youth retreats, youth federations, camp meeting, the choir was representing, youth juvenile too, centers as well. We attended as well. Oh, wow. And so those were the things that we did as well. But our center where we met was at a certain church. Is where we mostly met. And that was, that church is where I usually did the AY, Friday nights, so because since I was there already Friday night, the choir would meet their Friday night and then we'll meet their Saturday afternoon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So just to be clear, Alicia, when you talk about the diversity, are you also referring to other denominations coming together? There wasn't one
different.
setting.
It was not.
We're not just talking about Seventh-day Adventist Church. You were with Baptists, Methodists?
We had.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was
we
really
had
a big
Adventists,
diverse.
we had non-Adventists.
Okay.
We even
Wow.
had who came in that were just didn't have any denomination. They were not even Christians. They were just brought in because friends like, come check it, come with us. Hey, I have rehearsal, so come over,
So you guys created like your own, not church, but like when you mentioned we came to the church and would come and meet, building this community, would you say it was
was a community?
Its own ministry
became a community. Yeah.
Okay.
It became a community, became an own ministry because when we started noticing who was coming in, we started doing Bible studies on Saturday afternoon. So we started rehearsal, like it pushed earlier. So rehearsal would start Saturday afternoons, and we did Bible studies. And then after that, we delved into rehearsal.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's like a little church plant in its own from the music perspective.
Yeah.
And you bring all these people, what do you have in common? Okay, music. And this brings us together, hoping that, it draws them closer to Christ.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's
and there
different.
were several that were baptized from being there. I mean, several that returned to church because there were a lot of young people that left church too. And this was a community, when they saw who was there, they come would check it out, and then they stayed. And then later on, because of the of the Bible studies and the camaraderie we all had, they ended up baptizing as well. So we had a lot of them who got baptized. Either they accepted the message or they returned to church.
And some of these people as well had never before entered a church. And
there
was
were
the
some
first
who
time
never entered a church, and it was the first time. Mm-hmm.
So when would you say that deviates for you?
So one of it was at one point, it was like one thing led after, it was one thing after another. So the church wanted for the group to sing, for the service. But the pastor sat me down. There was a group of pastors. The church had like about 5 pastors, and they sat me down and they said, before, the choir goes in and sing, we will like a list first, because some of the members attended that church. So they said, we want a list of those who are Adventist, those who are not Adventist, those who are walking the spiritual life, and those who, are not, that are in the choir, but they're out partying and things like that. And I asked, I was like, well, why do you want this whole list? And he says, well, for those, those who are not spiritually right, they should not be up there singing.
Wow.
And so I was shocked. Because I was like, you're talking about young people. It's like you're talking about judging. It's like you're putting me in a situation that is difficult. So I got really quiet, and I looked at each of them and I said, well, if that's the case, that means none of us should be up there.
Mercy.
At all.
Wow.
And they got really mad, for me saying something like that, And so I said, well, when we think about it, Jesus knew that Judas was going to betray him, but Jesus still let Judas be with him, ministering, others. He didn't say, oh, I know you're not doing right. You're not coming with us. You're going to stay over there. He still came along, knowing what he was going to do, knowing what was happening. So that's what I end up telling them as well. It's like, even Jesus allowed Judas as well. And so after that, they said, we'll let you know. And I said, well, I'm not going to give you the list at all. So that was the first shock for me, that they will come almost like I'm holy, this holy, this attitude. And the next message was, they came and they said, the choir's not singing. So the choir looked and the choir said, why? And I just I didn't want to tell them because I knew there was a mix. So I would not say anything, but there was one elder there. And when he heard that, because one of, his son was in the choir, and his son came back because his son was out of church, and he came back because of the choir, because he was one of the musicians as well. And that's another thing. The choir had amazing musicians, too. So he went and he spoke to the pastors. I don't know what happened, but next thing you know, there's like, you can go ahead and sing. So we were allowed to sing. But that was one of the things that happened, because the church wasn't too happy. This church, they weren't quite happy that regarding like how there were so many different people in the choir. And they didn't like, sometimes there were jewelry and things like that. And there were some times that I did forget to tell them, like, oh, by the way, you're not supposed to wear jewelry, up there. There were times I forgot because so many things happen. Or, they knew, some of them knew that, when we go up there, this is what we wear. But there were times I did forget, to remind them, because they weren't really part of the church. And so I think it bothered the church, and you could tell something was happening within the church. So for a while, I'm like, we're going to go sing around at different churches. And we did. We sang at different churches.
Were you guys kind of like doing your own thing? You kind of started saying, okay, boy, we're not welcome here. You kind of felt like a family. We're going to kind of go do our own thing. Is that kind of like where you guys...
Yeah, in some ways, we didn't tell the church like...
Right. But you as an individual, what you were feeling.
Yeah.
Going to other places.
It was, because we felt like there was something brewing, and I felt it, and it was uncomfortable. And so that's when I was like, you know what? Because my concern was protecting the ones who were non-Adventist, non-Christian, and also the Adventists that returned.
Right.
So that was my concern. Yeah. And so it's like, let's go to the different churches. And we did. We went to we sang at, Sunday churches and other Adventist churches, and it went fine until around Christmas time. The music director asked us to go back to this church to sing, to be part of the program. And so I said, okay, that's fine. We'll be part of the program. He's like, everything will be fine, and I'm going to make sure there's nothing, happening. So it's like, okay, we'll go back. We will be there for the program. So we were all excited. We put together the music. And that was around the time too, like the Soulful Messiah came. It came out before, but it was really big. And so the Soulful Messiah had like the Soulful Messiah, it was like Handel Messiah, the Hallelujah chorus. So there was a soulful, like a gospel style of the Handel Messiah. And so we were like, oh, we need to sing this. It would be really nice. And so Friday night, we were practicing, and the other choirs were also practicing, and they heard us sing, practicing the Soulful Messiah. And they just blew. They came running from the sides. And it was just, you could tell like the spirit was not God. It was just a bad spirit, because the angry faces of the members, and then they were literally cursing at us, and saying, you're going to hell, da 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 da, and just words coming out that was just awful. And when that happened, many of the members left crying. We didn't have the rehearsal. They just left crying. And from there on, what hurt the most is that right at the same time this was happening, we started a church began at the same time. So there was a man, he was you call lay evangelists, ones who they have other jobs, but they also preach and things like that. So he was a powerful preacher. He was recruited by Jose Rojas with the beard. That's how he came to Christ. He was from Los Angeles, and, his story is powerful. And so he was very much with the young people, very popular, amazing preacher, everything. So he wanted to start a church, because the issue was, one of the things we figured out with the choir is that the people who came back because of the choir were the ones who didn't feel comfortable walking into church. Like they couldn't walk into church by themselves. At regular church, they felt uncomfortable. They felt like this paralyzing fear, and they felt like already they were being judged or whatever.
I would say like not welcome.
Yeah. Even if people did not know them, it was just something about, because of what happened to them, they couldn't step their feet into the church. At that time I didn't understand, but later on I did.
Right.
And so, what he did, and I'm going to say just his last name, but Guerrero, he started the young adult church, and it was for that. And so the group of us that started this choir, he called us, and also the Florida Conference youth leader, youth director, was part of it too, and he saw a need for that. And it was a church like Catalyst, like our church Catalyst. That's what it was. And so it was for those who didn't feel comfortable in a regular church, but you're in an environment that you walk into church, it doesn't look like church. You have some booths, you have some tables, you have donuts, you have coffee.
You have what? I'm sorry, Alicia, I didn't catch that.
You had, things
with almond milk.
Yes, with almond milk. And so, everybody will walk in and just fellowship.
Right.
And then at a certain time, church began and was music. And at that time is when we started this praise team. Before it was a thing, we had praise team. And so we had, that we broke the choirs into teams. And sometimes the choir will sing, it would be, a praise team. And so we had a full band and everything. And it was growing. And the ones who were walking in, our theme was "Come as you are," know. And the people that were walking in were just people that were longing to come back to church, but they had this paralyzed fear. And they just wouldn't. And so, the church that we started, and it was, I guess we can say Vineyard. I don't know if it was okay to say the name of the church or not, but Vineyard, it was a place where they felt this community, like this safe. They felt safe and that they belonged, Because as soon as they walked in, everybody made sure that they were seen.
Okay.
And they were welcomed and they were spoken to. And then, and after church, everything changed and it was potluck time. Everybody ate. And so it was very much fellowship. And so right when that was happening, this happens, with the choir at this other church for the Christmas program at a different church. And the most painful thing was, in this choir, we had powerful preachers, young men and women who could amazingly preach. And whenever we went somewhere, they would preach, especially one of them whenever we went to I don't remember how often we went to the juvenile center, and he was one of the ones who would preach, and they just loved hearing him preach. So we had young people who would put together things in the city, like would be events that, music, singing, concerts, right in the middle of a park, where people come in and they would pass out different things like that. And so that
very active, very
active, very active. And that's what was happening. That was the group. And so this happened, and when the devil sees something powerful happening, he knows how to attack.
Say that again.
And that's what happened. Because at the same time, there was another group that they were being attacked by the shepherd's rod.
Oh.
In the choir. And they were part of the Vineyard committee as well. And then right at the same time that this is happening, I was married before my first marriage. And right when all this was happening, my marriage becomes attacked. And so, my ex-husband was a musician as well and everything. So that just an attack from all sorts of directions. And I think to see each person, when that event happened at that one church, and to see these young, powerful, people that were also some of them my age mates and some of them younger, walk out of the church. One of them now, the one who was a powerful preacher, that everybody was like, man, you should be a pastor or anything like that. He produces movies and things like that are you would never think he was Adventist. You'd be shocked. You'd be shocked. You would never think that he was Adventist or he was a Christian, and he was, because now his lifestyle is completely opposite. And to see what that could do to people,
right?
And there were some that were baptized and gave their life. They walked out of the church completely. They turned around, no longer, they don't even touch church anymore.
Alicia, what you're talking about, I really want to take a moment and really kind of spend some time on this, because we talk about it, but I don't think we understand the severity of it. How, I'm not even going to say just unkind words, how far they can go, how our actions, and I'm going to keep saying as members, we have such a big responsibility. But to think of someone, right, when I will say in a spiritual high, how easy they can go on that spiritual low, and how easy they can drop. And I also try to remind even myself as a Christian that I'm not in the church because I'm perfect and I have it all together. I'm in the church because I recognize that I am in need and desperate of a savior.
Right.
And if we really truly come to that mindset, but if we're really honest with ourselves, we live in this world that church is for perfect people.
And it's not.
And I'm going to be the first one to break the silence if it hasn't been said. Because the reality is that is what we portray, but that is not what God's church, if that was the case, then where does God fall?
It's something like a friend of mine and I always said, because we were talking about that not too long ago, and one thing she said, it just feels like people take their meds during the week, and then when they come to church, they stop taking their meds, and their true self just comes out. The words, the negative, the attitude. And so we're like, can you just take your meds too before you come to church? Because at work,
right?
They act different at work,
right?
But it's like at church. But then we all know.
Well, you say better at work, because I would say better at work.
That's what I said. That's what I said. Better at work.
Better at home or better at church? Which one is it? But here's the thing, Alicia, that I want to say is, where does this idea come about? I mean, we talk about it, but where is it really coming from?
I think because people keep thinking we all know how Christians should act, and so people have this, if you're really a Christian, and you're going to love one another. You're going to be kind to each other. You're going to accept. You're going to tolerate one another. You're going to, you're not going to judge.
So from the word Christian.
I think it's from the word Christian, because really that's how we're supposed to be,
makes sense.
But we're all in a spiritual walk. None of us are perfect. And I'm not saying to excuse it.
Right.
But the reality really is that none of us are perfect. We know things happen at work too. There's some drama that annoys us, but we're getting paid. So we'll tolerate.
We need that money.
We'll
we
tolerate
need to pay
that. We'll tolerate that at work drama. Like I'm just going to ignore her, or hey, how are you?
Right.
But it's different at church. I think our expectations of one another is higher.
So high.
And I think part of it too is we're not authentic how we should be. And because we walk around in the church like we're perfect, things are well, I got my life together, my clothes are, from top, got my Coach purse, got my, I'm looking sharp from top to bottom. And we give this you know, we've give this, what's the word I'm looking for? Our impression to people that, you know, like we got it. We're perfect. You know, we got our life in control, but we don't know that, you know, I'm looking great with, you know, with my Chanel and everything, but inside I'm depressed, you know, and there are some other places, some other churches that you walk in and people will tell you, you know, I struggled yesterday and I had a cigarette, you know, but in our churches,
It's a taboo.
Yeah, it's like there's a fear of saying that because you don't want to be judged, and the last thing you want is somebody to, you know, all of a sudden, oh, well, you know, you got to pray harder. You got, you know, you feel like you're being, I don't want to say scolded, but you know, it's like sometimes you just need somebody to say, you know, let me hug you and let's pray. And that's it.
Intentionality goes far. And I think that, I mean, I learned this at an early age. I remember when I was engaged to Sergio, and I quickly, just without going too much into detail, I had a lady who quickly just grabbed my hand, didn't even know me, and just said, this is from the devil, my ring. And it's like, I can respect advice. I love advice, but do you even know my name? Get to know me first. When you build that relationship, then I know you're genuine, that you mean well, you care about me. Hey, Carol, we don't do this. Like, you know, like a wedding. You don't walk in with pants. Why? You may want to wear pants, but out of respect, right? You do things sometimes you don't even have to agree. There's just respect in the middle of it.
Right.
But a lot of times the way you approach things makes all the difference. And as I would say, as Christians, I'm going to point us out. As Christians, we have to have that extra grace. I'm going to say extra. We have to have that understanding and that lovingness towards people. When you approach them, like you said, people know when you're authentic and when you're not.
Yes.
And I think that's key. Like, get to know me first and then correct me.
Right.
That's okay. You can correct me all day, but get to know me first. That you care about me. You're not just ready to, you know, find the first mistake.
It is true. You accept correction more from somebody that you feel like really cares about you and loves you, and who took the time to know you.
Absolutely.
And also, when you do take the time to get to know somebody else, your correction becomes sweeter.
Oh yeah.
You know, you talk to that person in a more kinder way, like in that you actually care. You know, so
you pray about and you approaching that person. Lord, you're putting this in my heart. Like, I'm not the person, but if you really want me to be, like, there has to be a place and time for everything.
Right.
And I know it sounds like in a perfect world, but really, like, I'm like, what are we waiting for? Like, you know, I'm so passionate about the youth, and we always go back to why the youth, you know, leave the church and whatnot. And it's the same thing, it's the same cycle. We're not welcoming, and we really have to take a step back and analyze ourselves, and not just be quick to point at the world. Sometimes the world outside seems to be doing a pretty good job, at least in welcoming others. Hey, they welcome them to the wrong place, but they're welcoming them.
I mean, that is the world right now. The world is more about, you know, welcoming whoever you are. It doesn't matter how you are. You know, you be you, and we accept you.
Right.
You know, but the church is more like, you know, we'll accept you when you change. You know, when you become like us, then we'll accept you. You know, when you step up to our standards, then we'll accept you even more. And we'll accept you also by, guess what, we're going to give you a position, or we'll have you do this or that. And unfortunately, you know, you're giving a sign. You know, when you do that, you're telling everybody, like, you know, to be accepted, you have to act almost like you're perfect, you know, to really be looked up and be accepted, you know. But if you're somebody that you're struggling, or, you know, you're about to lose your house, or, you know, if, you know, you have a child out of wedlock, something like that, you know, you're not going to say anything, you know, or you find yourself pregnant, you're not married, you know, you're not going to say anything. You just all of a sudden disappear, you know, because you don't want anybody to judge you, you know, when all you need is love.
Yeah. So at the time, Alicia, that all of this went down, you mentioned that your marriage was being attacked. How did that develop? Tell us.
It ended up that we've separated our ways.
Was it a root? Was it a part of because of what was going on at the church, or not? Not at all.
When you look back, it's like one of the things I have learned is when you give your life wholly to Christ, to his ministry, and you focus on his ministry, the devil knows how to, and especially a ministry that becomes powerful, because that ministry was becoming powerful. The people we were touching, the lives we were touching, it was just people that you could just see what was happening. It's hard to explain,
right? But
you could see the work of the Holy Spirit just working on everybody, and then at the same time, it's like just, they knew they were at home. They knew they felt accepted. They knew they could just come, the way they are. I mean, I remember one time, one of the person, came to the church and, he was smelling like weed, but none of us said anything. I remember, the leader, he was a layman, and he came, he saw him and just gave him a hug. And he said, "I'm so glad you're here. I'm glad you made it." And I'll never forget that, this young man, he just broke down in tears, because he came that way because he knew he was not going to be judged. He knew he could be vulnerable, and he was still accepted. No one looked at him different. No one said, "You smell that, you smell that." Nobody did, And so that was the church. That was how it was. And then, after, we enjoyed so much each other's company as well. I mean, it grew because we also did things, even, Saturday nights, things like that. We looked, for each other. If somebody didn't show up at church, we looked for each other. We would call, each other up and see, how that person was. But that's how it was. I mean, okay. I'm not saying it's perfect because nothing is perfect. But what made it perfect was, I guess, everybody was authentic. We all knew we were struggling with something. None of us were perfect. And I really believe that the devil did not like what was happening because all the ones that were leaders, of this church and also of the choir, he was attacking all of us in different ways that he knew he could get us, the Achilles heel. He knew where it was for each one of us. And he did, and he attacked each and every one of us. And I can say that it was never the same. It was never the same after we were attacked. Because what happened is that while we were attacked, like for us, the marriage, after the marriage dissolved, I became bitter and angry. I went into a depression. I was already going into depression when it wasn't working. And I became more depressed. And I became really bitter and angry with God. Because I was like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, Lord, I did this. I brought people to you. People got baptized. Notice I'm thinking I. It became all about me. And that's part of like church hurt is like we put everything all about ourselves. We think about ourselves, and while people on the outside hurt us, at the same time, the devil is putting things in our mind to make us feel like we're really the victim, like we're the victim. And that victim, that feeling, and even though we are, instead of looking up to Christ and saying, okay, Lord, help me because I'm angry. I'm mad how they treated us. I'm mad about what happened. I need your help to overcome this. We start thinking like, why did it happen to me? Or why did they say that? Yeah, they really didn't care about me. They only acted like they did. And really that's the thoughts that came into my head. At that time is like, they really didn't care about me. I was just there to really help them with the church, because of the music. But they didn't really care about me. All these things. Because what happened is after the divorce, no one called to check up. No one called to say, hey, how are you doing? And so it hurt a lot that nobody did that. No one reached out. And later on I understand because it hurt them. They were hurt as well because, we were like, I hate to say we were powerhouses, but we did, him being a musician, me being a musician, all of that, all of us being so involved is just two leaders, marriage dissolving. I guess their pain is like, wow, do we have to choose? Who do we choose? And I know that was going later on. I find out that was happening with them because they don't want to choose. They don't want to lose us either because they were like, will they come back? If we ask them both to come back, how is going to, all these things were in their thoughts. But I didn't see that. I just saw like, I'm hurt. I was also angry with God, because God, I did all these things, for you. Yeah. And this is what I get, And so after that, I started, I would go to other churches. But when I went to other churches, because people knew who we were, the first thing they would ask, oh, how's your husband? I was like, hated that question. And so I was just to avoid the question, I was like, I'm not going to church.
Okay.
Wow.
I'm just going to stay home. And I stayed home for 7 years.
Wow.
7 years. Because once you break that spiritual, because first I was like, well, I'm still praying. I'm still studying the Bible. But I was studying with anger. There was anger still as I was studying. And, and my anger became more towards God, and like, you're so powerful. You couldn't save this, and wondering like, why? Mm-hmm. So, so I think because I wasn't really genuine, I can't explain, exactly that part, but because of my anger, slowly, I didn't, my prayers were more like in my journals, like, why, this, and just journaling, the things that happen and just, like, okay, God, you could have done this, kind of thing. And then, but really having that devotion was slowly over time. It was slowly like, it was like a slow breakup with God. It's just it wasn't quick. It was slowly breaking up with God, to a point that it became silent and I was stuck, in a place that was dark. It was very dark, and scary, and there was a point at that point, it was a point there that I had to run away from home. I had to run away. Because I was in a situation right there and then that, I didn't want to see my parents, especially my father's face, because I knew he would be embarrassed because, me walking away from church completely. I was at a point that if I was at Orlando, Florida is not that big. So you can go to the, grocery store and there's somebody from a church, from one of the churches, like, hey, how have you been? So I'm like,
you were just a celebrity, Alicia. You're just a celebrity. You couldn't hide.
I don't want to say we were a celebrity, but let me explain a little bit how big. So like when our wedding was so huge that we invited 250 people, but 500 showed up to just crash the wedding. Because the wedding was a Broadway. It was a Broadway.
Wow.
It was like, you know, musical. It was just, you know, a show.
Yeah.
But, you know, we were known because of our ministry. That's why we were known because of our ministry. And not only that, but also I taught at the Adventist school there in Florida too. Right. So that's another thing, you know.
How did you bounce back from that bitterness?
Being here in Houston by myself and being a single mom. Yeah.
How so? Tell me more about that.
I didn't want my child to not know God because of my bitterness. I didn't. And so I remembered I first went to my brother-in-law had a cousin that was here in Houston. And he called him and says, you know, my sister-in-law there, I need you to, you know, call her. And he did. He called me and says, you know, he invited me to his church. And so I went to his church, and but I didn't feel that there was, again, there was this whole panic attack for me, just feeling I wanted to run. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be around any church folks, you know. And though I faked it, I was just asking, you know, I was just acting like, hey, yeah, good to see you. Oh, good, church was great. I wanted to run away. I wanted to go home. That was me. I just wanted to go. I did not want to be, and I can't explain that. But it was just this, all of a sudden you could not breathe. Stepping into just a church, I couldn't breathe, you know. And I know that was like the devil did not want me to go back. I know that's what I know that was one of the reasons. And another time was, and I don't remember how I ended up going to this other church, but there was another church that I ended up going that was closer to where I lived. And I went because my mom was home. My mom, you know, came to visit, and she was with me, and she's like, we're going to church, you know, and she said, you know, you have a young daughter. You got to raise her under God. You got to raise her to follow God. And if you don't go to church, what are you raising? And so, and I knew she was right because I felt it. I felt that. So I went, and again, it was very difficult. You know, most of the time I would step out, you know, and act like, you know, my daughter didn't sit still. She never did. Little, she was always going, you know, and she was one. I mean, she learned how to walk when she was 7-8 months.
Wow.
Because she never stayed still. That was her. And so, so I made that my excuse, you know, and I would go out walking. And what's interesting is the pastor of that church was the son of the pastor back in Florida that was very that would fight for the choir. He was one of them, and it was his son was the pastor of that, and so his son came. You know, he was to me, and he quickly came over, you know, to me and talked to me, and I think right there and then I know that was God trying to connect, you know, but I was still trying to disconnect because right away his wife came and says, come to our home, you know, and have dinner with us. And of course my mom was with me. So my mom is very, you know, she's Puerto Rican. Oh yes, we're going. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so, you know, went to their home, and there, I mean, they, you know, they just took Jacita, and just loved on her. And then there was another family. The second time we went back to the church, and there was another family that many know well, but another family as well. Their boys were musicians, and that family just, especially the husband, loved my daughter. He just loved her a lot. And so I don't know if I believe it was God to make sure that I didn't step out, make sure I stayed in the sanctuary. He would just take her and say, come on, let's walk. Come on, because he saw that she was active. And he's like, come on, let's walk, let's go, and, they became like family. And I think because of them, I started going to the church because of them. For some reason with that family, and also, the pastor that was there too, that those two combined made me feel safe. And that's when I started going, because I started feeling safe.
I was going to say if there were individuals that played a role.
Yeah, and I say those two families.
In bringing you or helping you,
those two family really, and those two, the pastor, his wife especially, and also, the other family. Yeah, because they didn't ask questions. It's just like George just took, they didn't know anything about.
I was going to say just a simple invitation.
Yeah, it was a simple invitation.
Welcome to my home.
Yeah.
Let's have a meal.
Yeah.
Makes such a difference.
Yeah.
We've always say, hey, let's go to church, to worship God, to learn more about God, which we do. But it seems that we also go to church, and for the lack of words, I'll say it this way, because of people. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but perhaps it is through people that we are able to see and learn about the love of God. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that because of individuals, you left the church, right? But because of certain individuals, you decided to stay and to come back to the church. Mm-hmm. Would you say that's about right?
When we get hurt, we think so much of our own pain. Mm-hmm. And we become selfish, really. We do. We become selfish, like, I'm hurt. I don't like how they did this. And we forget that they're humans. Whether they did it on purpose or not, we forget that they're not perfect either. Just like we're not perfect. I'm sure all of us have hurt somebody at some point, even unknowingly, but when we're hurt, we don't see that, and we don't, we're just thinking so much of our own pain, that pain comes into anger. And that's when that anger is like, we're looking for where to place that anger. And unfortunately, I think this is where the devil just has that, I don't want to say perfect scheme, but it's that scheme that he actually makes us believe and think that it's the church's fault.
Takes advantage of the situation.
He takes advantage of the situation, whether it is or not, because everybody has a different story. But at the same time, how many of us have actually looked first to God and say, God, I'm angry, but I don't want to become a victim. And help me not to be a victim. Help me to still look up to you, and still love those people that I don't like right now.
That mistreat you.
Yeah. Because I think that's another test of Christianity, of being like Christ.
Preach.
Is, people who do you wrong or hurt you, because you're going to have that forever. As long as we're going to talk to each other, be around each other, people will always hurt you at some point. I mean, come on, even when you're marriage life, how many times in marriage your husband or wife have said something like, man, that kind of hurt,
The wives do hurt us husbands.
I knew it was coming. No, and it reminds me of that where they say if things are calm, you should worry. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah.
If things are calm, you should worry. But in the storm, it's where you should rejoice because something is happening.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that the devil can attack us at the not wrong place or time in our lives, but he uses to the advantage where we're at in our weaknesses. He uses that against us. So if, your weakness is your family, he can use your family, right? And whatever hurts you, that he knows where to attack. And I think that a lot of times you mentioned about pain and blocking it, or we become very kind of like centered in but I feel that I want. But when we learn to deviate from that a little bit, I think it's when God can truly start doing the healing.
Yeah.
And God can really start maybe even teaching you a lesson. And I think it's when, not that it's something I desire for people, but these circumstances is what builds us. And sometimes it's what even makes us the people we are today in a good way.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, as humans, we have to go through the tough lessons, through the suffering. If there is no pain, there is no gain. And I feel like that's something so relatable for so many people out there.
And it teaches us also the most difficult thing is forgiveness. Because part of that is you have to forgive, And
what about yourself?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm a big believer that I don't know how people forgive other people without first having a moment with themselves and forgiving themselves. And I think this is like an aha moment with God. At least I speak from personal experience, but I don't understand how you can forgive people if you yourself have not learned to forgive yourself. Have grace.
And that was
yourself.
perfect because, like I said, it took me a long time for myself to forgive myself. Years to forgive myself. Not until, really it was like after, meeting now, my husband, it took a while really to forgive myself, of, turning my back to God. That took a long time.
How have you dealt with those scars now, years later?
The scars are not there. Even now, it's like the people from the church, I've spoken to them, and, some of them I'm still in touch with. I mean, after years, been, here in Houston for 16 years, but, if I saw them again, I would just love them, and I will think only of the good memories that we've made. I wouldn't think, of what happened. That's in the past. I'm not mad at them. I'm not angry at them at all.
Scars have healed.
They have healed.
Amen.
I think what I've learned most is that, when something like that happens, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen again because that's life. That's the journey we're on. Is just to pray. Really, just pray. Stop and pray hard. And the tougher it gets, pray harder. And at some point, you'll see, the victory. You definitely will. And I think that's the only part that I regret is that I didn't pray. My prayers were selfish. Because I was like, why, God?
Yeah.
You remember I said, I did this, I did this. I think at the same time, to be honest, God humbled me. God humbled me as well.
You said something earlier. You said nobody called. Do you think if someone would have called, would have checked on you, things would have turned out differently?
In my mind, yes. But would it? Because I was really angry.
Okay.
I was hurt. And when I look back, it wasn't the church that I was really hurt at. I was disappointed because sometimes the way we think is like when we're working with God and building God's kingdom, working his ministry, we tend to think like nothing bad should happen to us. We should have this wonderful life.
And I sensed a little bit also of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like I built this.
Yeah.
And I was building this.
Yeah.
And we were doing this.
Yeah.
So when it crumbled down, your pride got hurt. Your pride got broken, and it hit you where it hurt because it was a you thing. Was it?
And all the
No,
work.
it wasn't. No, it wasn't a you thing. It was more embarrassment because everybody, like I said, people knew us. People really knew. People knew who we were, and it was an embarrassment. And maybe it was pride, but I didn't have that. Like I built this. It wasn't that. I didn't have that like feeling. It was more like I did this for you, God. I was part of. I followed you because I had a chance to go a different direction, Lord. I had a chance to go and work in a music business. I had a chance to do that, but I chose you, God. I chose this path, and this is what I got. Yeah.
What would you say to somebody who perhaps is in the shoes that you were a few years ago and is angry and bitter with the church? What would you say to that person?
First, ask God to take that anger and bitter away because it will only hurt you. You think that you're angry and bitter is to, you're trying. Somewhat at times, our anger and bitter is part of trying to make a point to the people that hurt us. Or pulling away, or because we do that. That's something that we do. But it's just hurting us more. All you're doing is you're going into deep, dark hole that you may not come out of. And you don't want to be that person not to come out of that hole and forever lose a chance of God's kingdom. You don't want that. So the first thing you do is pray that God takes away that hurt you have, the anger, anything that you have that has pulled you away from the church, just to pray that, he gives you that peace, gives it away, and to forgive.
What would be the message that you would want to tell the church in regards to this subject?
For the members is first, really just never judge. Because you don't know the impact that that pain has placed on that person. You don't know exactly what happened to that person. You may think because people talk, there's rumors, etc., and those are the worst.
You don't know their sins. You don't know their battles.
You don't know the battles. You don't know their personality. Everybody's personality, and you don't want to contribute to that at all. And I think more than anything is, first as a member, you pray that God gives you the wisdom first on how to treat that person, who may be hurting. Because a lot of times that you can say that one word and is the most, it can just push that person more away. So you really have to pray that God gives you the wisdom or the words to say to that person. And the first thing is just love on them, but be genuine. Not, I want to make a point. Be genuine in that love. Really care. I guess I'm a very visual person, but I would think like if you find, this little bird that is hurting, you're not going to grab that bird quickly. You're going to gently carry that bird, and, you're just going to gently look over it, and gently make sure it's okay. And you're going to gently give it, whatever it needs. You're going to be very gentle about it, until, you see that it's okay and it's free to fly, And I think that's how we need to be. Let's not assume. Let's just pray for wisdom and love.
Amen. Mark Finley one time told a group of us pastor, he said, the church is dirty, but the church is the bride of Jesus. And, people with stories like you in the church, at the end of the day, we are trying to share the love of God that has been shared with us. And sometimes, of course, we fail the mark to do that. But I want to say that we are so glad to have you here at West Church, because your ministry has had an impact not only on your team leaders, but also on the entire church.
And you have been a blessing personally to me. I admire and respect you. I don't know, sometimes I feel like as teachers, we're not appreciated as much. So today I want to remind you how amazing you are. Again, going back with that bio, teacher, mother, getting your doctorate, it's just admirable. And I hope you know that you're valued.
And that's because of my support system.
That's amazing.
Can't do it without
That's
them.
amazing.
Amen. Amen. And your favorite pastor.
I have 3 favorite pastors.
Alicia, we like finishing this an interview with some fun questions.
Okay.
Are you up for it?
Go ahead. I'm bad at these things. Go on.
If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Ooh, can I have 2?
Okay, go for it.
No, just one.
Okay. To fly.
Okay.
And, Genie, with her nose, and, things would disappear and go, and she would just disappear and keep going. Or cleaning, and then things are just clean and done. What? Lesson plans, just done.
Love it.
Yes.
Good.
What is the worst advice that has ever been given to you?
Not to major only in music because you can't make any money in that.
You showed them.
Well, that was my dad. He made me do a double major. I had to do music and information systems management.
Le faltó fe.
Really?
Yeah,
Hey, but
maybe
look, you're
did double
talented in
major.
music.
Yes.
But that's God.
That is God.
When I tell you that is God, it is God.
What is the best advice you have received?
To put God first in everything that you do, even when you go shopping, pray. Because we see that dress and you don't have that money,
But he will make it happen. Faith, sister. He will give us our
Maybe
needs
you and
and
Cal
wants.
should have a prayer session, a prayer vigil.
We can wear it for work too, honey.
I know you do. Your mind goes through all these things like, and that bill. I think I could just put it in.
Alicia, thank you so much.
Thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank
May God
you.
continue to bless you in what you do.
And you too, both of you too. This is a great idea of the podcast. It's wonderful. It's good to hear other people's story.
Amen. Right. Amen. Folks, thank you for joining us in this season of Church Scars. We are going to take a break for the next 4 weeks, but we will be soon announcing our next series on this podcast called The Journey. So stay tuned and we'll see you soon. God bless.